I've shown it to other historians, right, who've told me, honestly, I never would have believed you if you hadn't shown me the actual document. Like, this is so unusual. My work thus far has been primarily focusing on the 16th and 17th centuries in colonial Latin America, specifically looking at African populations in the Spanish-speaking Caribbean. One random document that I found was written by a woman in 1593 who was there in a port on the island of Tenerife in the Canaries, and she described herself as a widow, as a vecina, no, a permanent resident or citizen of Santo Domingo in what's today the Dominican Republic, and she described herself as being de color mulata, mulata in color, right? So African descent person. She also described herself as the owner of a ship that was there in the port, and says she was on her way back to the Caribbean. So this is really unusual source to find a woman who describes herself as being of African descent in notarial records and as the owner of a ship, right, that's making these transatlantic voyages, right? So I was really intrigued, and I, analyzed the document very closely and wrote a little brief article about it. But then I kind of couldn't let it go, and I kept looking for more information about her. You could sort of put together like a string of different documents and figure out where is she going, who is funding her, who is she funding, what is she agreeing to do, who is she paying. I'm thinking about the crew on her ship, for example. Yeah, all these different sort of logistical aspects and sort of basic sort of economic structure of her travels and her business activities. And so I've gradually been able to reconstruct 2 transatlantic voyages that she made from the Caribbean to the Azores and then to Seville, and then from Seville to the Canary Islands and then to Cuba. So she did this long circuit, right, across the Atlantic twice. She ends up in La Habana marrying a man described as Catalan. So this is her second marriage. The Havana elites attend her wedding. She's the godmother for enslaved people and for the children of other free women of African origin, though she's never described as being black or mixed race or anything. So she's a really fascinating person, and I look forward to filling in some of the gaps, I guess, about her and speculating about what this means and that sort of thing. This woman, Catalina Dos Santos is her name. I think she's an outlier, right? I think she has a much more prosperity than most women of African descent by far, but it helps us to think about the possibilities, right? What possibilities were there? What the world might have been like. One of the arguments that I want to make about her is that she was prosperous enough as a person of African descent that she's never identified publicly as being, mulata or black or mixed race or whatever. She's just called Catalina Dos Santos, right? But she maintains these social ties, right? Even if she's at a more elite level, right, than most people of African descent, she still maintains these social ties to other women of African origin, especially free women of African origin. Even though she's married to a peninsular Espanol, or she's married to a Catalan, rather, she's married to a person from Catalonia with a royal treasurer attending their wedding, right, in Havana, things like this. She still has these godparentage and sort of, as we say, fictive kinship, right, these social networks, right, that include other people of African origin who would have been less prosperous than her. The person I'm studying is not representative of the vast, right, broad majority of experiences, the majority of people of African descent in the 16th or 17th centuries. But she provides us a really interesting example of the possibilities that are there, forces us to sort of broaden our mind and think about, wow, what happened to make those possibilities disappear, right, in the following centuries, for so long. I think this story provides a sort of ground level look at this major circuit that's associated with Spanish imperial power, the Indies fleets or the treasure galleons, and look at, well, what does it mean if one of the owners of one of those ships was a Afro-Caribbean, right, woman and a widow, right, from Santo Domingo. She's the only person who ever identifies herself as being mulata. No one ever else, no one writes about her that way. She's the only person who identifies herself that way. So what does it mean that, right, the Spanish Empire is relying on people that we normally think of as marginalized or outsiders, right, to fulfill one of these major functions of this imperial circuit? We don't know a lot about women as ship owners during this period, and we specifically, we know almost nothing about women of African descent as people who participated in this early modern Iberian maritime world. But there's never been a study of, free black women or free women of some African origin in relation to Spain's Indies fleets, right, or the Spanish Empire. And so one of the arguments that I want to say is there were these places and densely populated places, these different archipelagos, including the Caribbean, the Azores, the Canaries, where you had these racially diverse societies that have been around for a while. In terms of thinking about Spanish colonialism and the Spanish Empire, in which many scholars are now reevaluating this, maybe the Spanish monarchy wasn't really all that powerful. They're so far away, maybe not able to control things on the ground as much as we have often imagined. I think it's also important to think about how these different places were connected to each other. Using her story, right, we can think about the way these places were connected and how her story fits in or contrast with some of our assumptions about the way the Spanish Empire worked during this period.